James did not know it then, but the moment he first locked eyes with Casey, the orphaned gorilla who had lost everything, the air itself seemed to shift. It wasn't the kind of miracle wrapped in thunder or fire. It was gentler, softer, like sunlight slipping through storm clouds after endless rain. The trainer spoke of routines and research, of safety protocols and strict schedules, but James only saw her trembling hands reaching out, as if searching for a promise she didn't yet understand. And in that instant, something sacred whispered between them. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. This was not a chance encounter. This was destiny wearing the face of a gorilla, and the heartbeat of a man who had once thought miracles were only stories in old books. From that day on, every breath James took near Casey was proof that miracles aren't rare. They are simply waiting for us to believe. The air was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that doesn't just linger, but presses against the chest until breathing feels like a prayer. In that silence, James Carter found himself standing on the edge of everything he knew and everything he feared. For 3 decades, he had walked the thin line between man and beast, carrying protocols like scripture, living by rules written to keep both human and animal alive. Yet, in this moment, as he stared into the eyes of a 200-kilogram gorilla named Casey, every rule dissolved like mist in morning sun. Those eyes were not wild, not threatening. They were pleading, a soul locked inside a body of pain, whispering silently, "Stay." The radio crackled with authority. "James, get away from there, right now." Director Lucas Anderson's voice was sharp, commanding, brimming with fear disguised as discipline. But James couldn't move. 10 meters of air and earth separated him from Casey. Yet in that narrow distance, he saw something greater than fear. He saw trust waiting to be born. And trust, James knew, was rarer than survival itself. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. That verse echoed in his heart, making his hands tremble. Not with fear, but with responsibility. What would you do if it were you standing there? Would you obey the rules, or obey the call of a living soul begging not to be abandoned? The question hung like thunder in the sky. "James, please!" Chief Veterinarian Olivia's voice broke through. Breathless from running, her white coat smeared with dust, her eyes wide with the terror of what might unfold. She had studied gorillas her entire life. She knew their strength. How one swing of an arm could shatter bones. How claws longer than a man's fingers could tear through steel. And yet, here was James, gray-haired, weary-eyed, his heart louder than science, his love greater than reason. Casey tilted his massive head, his breath ragged, chest rising and falling like waves crashing against rocks. Pain radiated from him, raw and undeniable. The barbed wires had sunk deep, feeding his blood to the thirsty earth below. James's instincts stirred like a father watching his child suffer. This creature was not just an animal in his care. He was family. "Listen to me, James." Lucas's voice roared again, harsher now. "Your retirement is overdue. You can't take these risks. Think of Margaret. Think of your family." Yes, Margaret, his wife of 45 years. She was waiting at home, waiting with prayers clutched in trembling hands, her heart weary from watching her husband give himself to the wild again and again. Yet here James was, unable to turn his back, unable to walk away. He nodded absently to Olivia, but his soul was already stepping forward. Casey's eyes lifted, and in that lift, James saw it. Fear. Not fear of pain, not fear of death, fear of being abandoned, fear of being left alone in the hour when he needed his friend most. And that fear tore James apart. "Don't leave me." That's what those eyes said. And James couldn't. He wouldn't. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And so James, breaking every rule, crawled beneath the fence. His knees kissed the dirt. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Every crunch of gravel underfoot was louder than gunfire. But Casey did not move. He only watched. The moment stretched like eternity itself. James opened his palms, lifting them high. His voice steady though his hands trembled. Easy boy, easy, I'm here." Olivia's scream tore through the air. "James, stop! This is suicide." But James could no longer hear her. All he heard was the labored breathing of the giant before him. Every second was dangerous, every breath a gamble with death. Then, the world froze. Cassie shifted. His massive body turned, muscles rippling beneath torn fur. Eyes fixed on James. Lucas's hand flew to his weapon. Olivia squeezed her eyes shut, unable to watch what she thought would be the end, and then the unthinkable. Cassie did not lunge. He did not strike. He lifted his massive paw, trembling, wounded, dripping with crimson, and stretched it toward James. The paw that could end his life in a single blow instead reached for mercy. James's eyes filled with tears. "Help me," the gesture said without words. In 30 years, James had never seen anything like this. And so, with his knees sinking into the dirt, he whispered back, "Okay, buddy. Okay. I'll help you." Dropping to Casey's level, James pulled pliers from his pocket. The barbed wire glistened cruelly in the sun. Each twist of steel a wound carved deeper into flesh. Blood pooled beneath them. Every cut of wire mattered. Every heartbeat was a race against death. As the first wire snapped free, Casey grunted softly, a sound that shook the air. But he did not move. He trusted, and in that trust, James' trembling ceased. It was as though Casey's calm flowed into him, binding them in silence. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together. And a little child will lead them. For in this moment, predator and human, strength and weakness, met not in violence, but in peace. The world held its breath. James worked carefully, sweat dripping into his eyes, whispering encouragement like a prayer. "Almost there, buddy. Just a little more." The last wire was deep, cruelly lodged, tearing with every move. Then, the moment of grace, Cassie lifted his other paw, the uninjured one, and gently placed it on James's shoulder. The ground itself seemed to shake with the weight of it. Yet the touch was tender. His massive fingers curled lightly around James's shirt. Not in force, but in gratitude. Olivia's sob broke through the silence. Lucas froze, weapon forgotten. Chloe, the photographer, clicked furiously through tears, capturing a moment that would outlive them all. Trust had taken flesh. When the final wire snapped free, Cassie staggered, bloodied but unbound. But instead of retreating, instead of charging, he leaned forward. He pressed his enormous head against James's shoulder. His breath, heavy but steady, mingled with James's tears. Relief filled the air like music. Lucas's voice trembled through the radio. "In 30 years, I've never seen this." He could not finish, because the sight before him defied language. James stroked Casey's head, voice breaking. "Good boy, very good boy." But duty called still. The wound bled. The doctors had to come. James whispered, "Now the doctors will take care of you, buddy. Trust them like you trusted me." And Casey did. The tranquilizer dart came. Casey did not resist, because James had given him what no dart, no medicine could. Trust. And so it ended, not with violence, but with grace. As Casey drifted into the safe darkness of anesthesia, his gaze never left James. He knew he was safe. James, battered, scratched, and exhausted, stood shaking, tears streaming down his face. Olivia examined him, muttering, "You survived like a miracle." Lucas shook his head, eyes full of reluctant admiration. "You've gone crazy, James Carter. But what you did, it was amazing." Around them, silence returned, but it was no longer heavy. It was holy. James placed his hand over his chest, whispering a prayer of thanks. He had broken every rule, but he had obeyed the higher law of love. And in that sacred law, humanity and animal had met, not as enemies, but as brothers. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. That day, a gorilla's cry for help became a man's answer, and the bond they forged will echo forever. A viral YouTube story, yes, but more than that. A heartwarming animal video carved into eternity, a story of animal rescue, of survival, of miracle, of a human and an animal proving that love is stronger than fear. And as Casey healed, so too did James. Not just his body, but his soul. Because in the end, the wild does not just need saving. Sometimes it saves us too. Casey could have hurt him. Everyone knew it. The claws, the strength, the sheer force of a gorilla's body could have ended James in a heartbeat. And yet, Casey didn't. Why? When reporters asked James later, he said the words that came easiest. He came with open hands. He came with mercy. Perfect love drives out fear. And so, when Casey was finally lifted onto the stretcher, his breathing slowing, his body giving way to exhaustion, his eyes never left James. Half-conscious but still aware, the gorilla locked his gaze on the man who had knelt in the dirt for him, and James, refusing to walk behind, walked right beside, step by step, until the gates of the clinic swallowed them both. Chloe, the photographer, wiped her tears while her camera still clicked. "We must use these photos," she whispered with trembling hands. "The world must see this. People need to know that such a bond can exist, between human and animal, between strength and compassion." James only nodded, his silence saying more than words, for perhaps, if the world saw Casey's trust, they too might begin to trust nature again. That evening, when James returned home, Margaret was waiting by the door. Her hands clutched her apron as if clinging to prayer beads. Her eyes read not from the kitchen smoke but from worry. She had heard. News traveled faster than breath. For hours, her heart had feared the phone's cruel ring. But now he stood before her, scratched, bruised, alive. "I heard," she whispered, her voice cracking like glass. "I was very worried, but I'm proud." She wrapped her arms around him, a trembling embrace of love seasoned with fear. "You acted like a real hero today." James shook his head, resting his cheek against her hair. "I'm not a hero. I just did the right thing." But even as he said it, he knew, deep inside, today had been more than duty, more than bravery. It had been a moment of grace. The trust in Casey's eyes, that silent surrender, was the greatest gift James had ever received. Later that night, the television blared headlines. "Miraculous rescue at wildlife sanctuary." Reporters called it heroic. Anchors called it sensational. But James simply changed the channel. For him, this wasn't news. This was love. And love was too sacred to be turned into spectacle. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Yet neither James nor Margaret knew. The true story had only just begun. The next morning, James stood at the clinic door, hesitating. His hand gripped the frame, his chest tight. What if yesterday had only felt like a miracle? Because they had all been drowning in adrenaline and fear. What if the trust he thought he saw in Casey's eyes had been an illusion? He was afraid not of the gorilla, but of disappointment. Then a voice pulled him back. "James?" It was Olivia, rushing toward him, her face lit with awe. "Thank goodness you came. Casey, he's been looking for you. This isn't normal. Injured animals usually avoid humans, but he won't stop looking at the door." James' breath caught. Slowly, he stepped inside, and then, there he was. Casey, bandaged, battered, standing tall inside a large cage. As soon as his eyes found James, his lips parted and he made that low, familiar sound. Not aggressive, not fearful. It was a greeting. James's throat tightened. "Hello, buddy," he whispered, walking closer. "How are you today?" And in a gesture that silenced the entire room, Casey stepped forward and extended his uninjured hand against the wire. James, trembling, pressed his fingers against the cage. And for a moment, it wasn't man and beast. It was family greeting family. In the corner stood Dr. Michael Turner, the primate behavior specialist flown in from London, his notebook filled with scribbles, his face pale with astonishment. "I've been studying gorillas for 30 years, he said slowly, shaking his head. "An injured gorilla doesn't attach himself like this. What we're witnessing is not normal. James, he doesn't see you as a rescuer. He sees you as kin, as family." His words carried the weight of history, of science colliding with miracle. But James barely heard him. Science could explain behavior, but not love. Love needed no translation. So James returned every day. He pulled up his chair by the cage, speaking softly. Sometimes reading aloud from old books. Sometimes sitting in silence. And Casey, against all odds, listened. His great body, usually restless when others approached, stilled whenever James entered. His ears seemed to lean in. His eyes softened. When James asked, "How's the paw, big boy?" Casey lifted it like a child showing a wound to his father. James examined it carefully, whispering encouragement. "It's healing well, buddy. You're strong. So strong." Dr. Turner scribbled furiously, whispering to Olivia, "I've never seen anything like this." And Olivia could only nod, tears brimming. For in that cage, the barrier of species had fallen. What remained was the bond of hearts. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. And yet, here was a groan, turned into song. Love's miracle blooming in a place meant for cages. By the third day, the bond deepened beyond imagination. Casey, thirsty, held his water bowl out toward the bars, not drinking on his own, but waiting. James frowned at first, not understanding, until Olivia gasped, "He wants you to fill it. James, he's waiting for you." And so James did. He took the bowl, filled it with fresh water, and placed it back. Casey drank deeply, but his eyes never left James, each sip a silent thank you. Chloe's camera clicked endlessly, capturing moments that words could not hold. James reading aloud, Casey tilting his head as though pondering the story, James laughing softly, Casey pressing his paw to the bars in response. These photos are already spreading worldwide. Chloe whispered in wonder. Every documentary channel is calling. They all want to tell this story. But James wasn't listening. Fame didn't matter. Media didn't matter. All that mattered was that Casey was healing. On the fifth night, Dr. Turner showed James something astonishing. Security footage, 2:30 in the morning. Casey sat in his cage alone in the darkness. Yet his massive hands were moving. He was imitating the way James sat in his chair. The same posture, the same stillness, as if reliving the presence of his friend. James' heart broke open. "It means he thinks of you even when you're gone," Dr. Turner explained softly. This is emotional attachment beyond anything I've ever documented." James's eyes filled with tears. Casey missed him. Casey carried him in his heart. And the next day, when James arrived late, Casey rose, lifting his paws, vocalizing joy as if to say, "Where were you? I missed you." James pressed his hand to the cage, whispering apologies. Casey lowered his massive head, inviting James to stroke him. And when James's hand touched fur, the gorilla closed his eyes, humming with contentment. "So this is unprecedented," Dr. Turner whispered. Gorillas don't ask to be touched, but he asks it of you." By the sixth day, the sanctuary was alive with whispers. Scientists spoke of breakthroughs. Photographers spoke of miracles. But James only saw his friend. Yet even as his bond with Casey deepened, the storm of rules closed in. That morning, Lucas called him into his office. His face was grave, his voice heavy. "James, I have bad news. The upper board has decided to suspend you temporarily. They say what you did was too dangerous, that it could set a bad example for the rest of the team." James froze. 1 week. Just 1 week. But to him, it felt like exile. His heart pounded. His chest ached. How could he leave Casey now, when trust was still fragile? When love was still blooming? Lucas sighed, lowering his voice. "I fought for you, James. I told them what you did wasn't recklessness, it was miraculous. But rules are rules. I'm sorry." And in that silence, James felt the weight of loss heavier than any wound. Yet even in that moment, he remembered Casey's hand on his shoulder, his head resting against him, his eyes full of trust. That memory would not be taken by any suspension. That bond would outlive rules. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. And so would the love between a man and a gorilla. The beginning feels like punishment. Symbolic, cruel, yet necessary. James is told he cannot see Casey, the gorilla who has become not just a patient but a soul companion. His recovery must continue, but James won't be allowed to be there. For James, this order is unbearable. He stands in the dim corridor of the sanctuary hospital, his fists trembling, his voice breaking as he whispers to himself, "How can I leave Kai? How can I abandon the one who trusts me most?" He imagines the gorilla waiting, searching at every sound, wondering why the human. He whispers, "I have to go now." As he rises, Casey lets out a sound unlike any roar. Not anger, but panic, grief, fear. The sounds echo through the steel bars. "Don't leave me." James turns at the door, and their eyes lock, pleading eyes against breaking heart. And then, silence, heavy as stone. 1 week, James tells himself. Just 1 week. Yet, in that moment, he knows that week will feel like eternity. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. That 1 week becomes a valley of shadows for James. He wakes in the night, sweat dripping, hearing phantom echoes of Casey's cries in his dreams. At the breakfast table, Margaret watches her husband crumble into silence, spoon unmoving, eyes staring through the walls as if searching across miles of jungle and iron for his friend. "James, you'll make yourself sick," she pleads, her voice gentle. But James shakes his head. "You don't understand, Margaret. He's waiting for me. I promised him." The third day brings a call that pierces the marrow of his soul. Olivia's trembling voice whispers over the phone, "James." Casey isn't eating. He sits at the door, hour after hour, as if waiting for you. He's fading. James presses the receiver against his forehead, his heart splintering. "What can I do?" "They won't let me near him." Olivia whispers back, "I don't know, but he misses you more than anything." By the 5th day, despair deepens. Reports say Casey has stopped responding, curled in the corner like a shadow of himself. Dr. Turner warns Lucas, "This is serious. Casey is falling into depression. Without James, he may never recover." A report is filed on the 6th day. James Carter's presence is no longer optional. It is a medical necessity. Finally, the chains of authority break. Upper management yields. On the 7th day, James is allowed to return. He races through the clinic doors, breathless, terrified of what he'll see. And what he sees shatters him. Casey, once vibrant, now reduced. Eyes dulled, ribs showing. His mighty frame hunched in despair. "A Kixi," James calls, his voice trembling. The gorilla lifts his head slowly, unsure if this is a dream. And then of recognition. A cry bursts from him, primal and joyous, echoing across the sanctuary halls. He leaps to the bars, reaching, his hands trembling in desperate need of touch. James presses against him, tears pouring. "I'm here, buddy. I came back. I'll never leave you again." The room fills with something beyond science. A reunion of spirits. Dr. Turner writes in his notes, "The human-animal bond is not peripheral. It is life itself. Healing flows from love." But James doesn't care about theories or reports. He cares only for the light returning to Casey's eyes as he eats again. Strength flowing back into his veins, joy roaring through his chest. The sanctuary learns a truth that day. This is not treatment. This is love, and love is the most powerful medicine on earth. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. 2 weeks later, the storm breaks again. James is summoned to the meeting room. The air is thick, faces heavy. Lucas speaks softly. "James, please sit. We need to talk about Casey." Fear tightens James's chest. Hasn't he recovered? His wound's closed. He's eating. He's happy. Dr. Turner interrupts gently. "James, Casey has fully recovered. That's not the problem. The problem is, he's ready to return to the wild." The words land like thunder in James's skull. The wild? What do you mean? "He's happy here. He's happy with me." Olivia's voice trembles. "I know this is hard, but Cassie's place is in nature. He deserves freedom." James erupts. "No, he's my friend, my family. Why do we have to let him go?" Lucas raises his hands. "James, listen. This isn't easy for us either. But Casey's real home is the forest. He must be free. The room blurs. James stumbles out, tears stinging his eyes, heading straight to Keishi. The gorilla greets him with joy, pressing close, unaware of the storm that approaches. James whispers through tears, "Buddy, I'll have to leave you soon." Kessie's eyes search his face, silent, trusting as if to say, "I understand." That final week becomes both treasure and torment. James spends every waking moment with Cassie, reading, singing, recounting memories. He whispers, "Do you know, Cassie? You're the bravest, kindest soul I've ever met. You trusted me, and I trusted you. This trust, it will never end." At night, he sleeps beside the cage, their hands touching through the bars, hearts bound in silence. On the last night, James whispers, "Tomorrow, they'll take you home. But know this, you'll always be in my heart. If you ever need me, I'll be there." Keizi's fingers intertwine with his one last time. Two friends, two brothers, saying goodbye without words. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to embrace and a time to let go. The morning comes. The truck arrives. The new cage stands ready. But Kessie, in an act of trust that moves everyone present, walks into it voluntarily. No tranquilizer, no fear, as if saying, "If this is what you ask, I trust you." Tears stream down James's face as the truck pulls away. He runs behind, breath ragged, eyes locked on Casey until the vehicle disappears. Hours later, they reach the forest. The cage door opens. Cassie pauses, nostrils flaring, ears twitching at the symphony of the wild. Slowly, he steps out. James watches from the observation vehicle, his heart splitting yet swelling with pride. Cassie climbs trees, tastes fruit, reclaims the kingdom that is his. But then, he turns, walks toward the vehicle. Dr. Turner warns, "Stay inside, James." But James steps out, calm. Cassie approaches. In that sacred silence, he rests his great head on James's shoulder. A final gesture. A farewell carved in eternity. James strokes his fur, sobbing, "Go, buddy. Be free. Don't forget me." Their eyes lock. Two souls saying what words cannot. And then Cassie turns, walking into the forest, sunlight spilling on his back like a crown. So, if the sun sets you free, you will be free indeed. Weeks turn into months. James's body grows weaker. His heart, broken by absence, falters. Doctors say stress and sorrow have carved too deep. He refuses the hospital. "I want to stay near the sanctuary," he tells Margaret. In his final days, he speaks only of Cassie. "He gave me the greatest gift of all, unconditional trust. To find that in this world, it's a miracle." 3 months later, James passes peacefully in his sleep, a smile on his lips. At his funeral, hundreds gather. The photograph of him and Casey holding hands stands at the altar. Lucas speaks. "James showed us that love knows no boundaries. He didn't just save a gorilla. He taught us what it means to be human." The sanctuary builds a statue in bronze, James and Casey's hands reaching for each other. The inscription, "Trust knows no boundaries." And in the forest, Cassie thrives, leader of his troop, strong and free. Yet each sunset, he still looks to the horizon, as if remembering the